Welcome, colleagues. Welcome to the next episode of DINCast, where today we're going to be exploring leadership and, in particular, personal and organizational well-being. It's going to be a hugely important issue as time goes on, and I'm delighted to be joined by a good friend of mine and a really, really good bloke, Liam Black. I've known Liam for over 20 years now, and he's never failed to surprise me with his energy and his enthusiasm with all of his ventures that he's been into, and particularly wanted to explore one with him today, the Big White Wall, which is all to do with supporting people and organizations through personal well-being. Liam, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you?
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Liam. I am, what can I tell you about myself? I married to Maggie. I have 3 adult children, 3 grandchildren, and 1 on the way. It's horrible not being able to see my kids, but particularly my grandkids, but thank God for FaceTime and other bits of technology. How do I spend my time? I chair a couple of impact businesses, one of them being the Big White Wall, which we'll talk about, which is a online anonymized mental health business, which is having a quite a challenging, interesting time in these, as millions of people around the world are feeling isolated and anxious. I'm also involved in an impact fund. We invest in lots of impact first businesses in healthcare, homelessness and other areas. I do some coaching and mentoring of leaders doing interesting stuff. Before that, I ran a leadership company called Wavelength for 10 years, which I exited 2 and a bit years ago now. And then before that, I was a CEO in various companies, including part of the Jamie Oliver Group. And then before that, I was in Liverpool for 20 years and did all sorts of things in social enterprise there. I try and do a bit of writing, a bit of blogging, so I'm 60. And I'm thinking about what my 60s are going to be like. And fuck me, who knew it would begin with a pandemic? Hopefully, they'll end better in some ways than they've begun. So that's what I do.
In terms of the current crisis, how well do you think current leaders are reacting in the current situation?
Oh, it's a good question. From where I'm sitting, mixed. I think there are... if you consider that, so we had an investment committee meeting beginning of last week, and the agenda was literally divided into positive, negative, and existential. And I think for all of us, I think we are confronted with a genuinely unique situation. None of us have been in a situation like this. There'll be times that we've had cash flow problems or difficulties, but this kind of blanket. Everyone is affected deeply, and we don't know what the future is going to look like. That's new. And I've talked about this coronavirus being a truth serum, in that it will, everyone's got to take it as a leader, and it will reveal who we really are as leaders. There will be nowhere to hide. So there are some well-known cases, aren't there, of the guy who runs Weatherspoons and the guy who runs Sports Direct, who really, I suppose, what the truth serum did for them, it just reminded us what they're really like, rather than surprising us. And then there are some other people like James Timpson, who runs the Timpson chain, who, again, well known as a purpose-driven, honest, authentic leader, lays everybody off on full pay, until they come back. I don't know if you've seen the video that's doing the rounds that was made by his staff, thanking him. I mean, if you want to know what a purpose-driven business looks like and what the impact in the culture can be, have a look at that video. So I think some people are responding really badly, and I think some people are responding very well. There are some people in my circle who I've been appalled at the way in which they are behaving, and I may publicly out them if they don't change what they're doing and the way in which they're treating people. So I think it's mixed. But I think for anyone who is serious about trying to lead in a purpose-driven, humane way, it's very, very challenging. I mean, one of the things that they don't tell you about being a CEO or senior leader is how lonely it can be. Certainly no one told me that when I first became a CEO. But, given the decisions that are having to be made at the moment about furloughing people, managing cash flow, being anxious about the future and whether our businesses have a future or not, that can be very isolating and very lonely. And I think that in that loneliness and isolation, we can be at our best or we can be at our worst.
So you've mentioned about sort of working in a high pressure situation. You were brought in, one of your career highlights was to establish and set up the Jamie Oliver 15 social enterprise. And I know we've spoken before, you had to deal with a lot of situations there that you simply hadn't come across before, and you were genuinely working in a high pressure situation. Could you share some of the ways that you led during those times and how you managed to sort of, keep yourself upright and breathing?
It was a brand new sector, a brand new city, just a completely brand new business, very, very different. And it really did first few months, it really knocked me for six, to be honest. But I think I learned there some lessons that I've tried to use since, and currently I'm trying to live out as the chair of the companies that I'm involved with. And one is to not make your own melodrama other people's melodrama. Really deal with your own shit before you step into the light, if that makes any sense. So I think I see a lot of leaders, and I did this at the beginning. You got very reactive and spewing out my own anxiety and my own confusion and uncertainty onto other people. So I think getting a grip of yourself, no matter how afraid you're feeling, how anxious or uncertain that you're feeling, dealing with that before you communicate with other people, I think is important. Doesn't mean you have to lie, doesn't mean you have to be inauthentic or not yourself, but I think it's very easy to pass on your own stress and uncertainty and anxiety to the people that you lead, and that helps nobody. I think in certain in situations, particularly like the one we're in, and the ones that I've been in on a much nowhere near as serious as this, the best thing you can do as a leader is to get your own shit together and not transfer onto other people all of that sort of stuff. Because what people look for, they don't look for, no one's expecting a silver bullet. No one's expecting, I've got all the answers. No one's expecting, oh, look, here's 10 million quid. We never have to worry about money ever again. No one is expecting that. But I think what people do want is transparency, and they want honesty, and they want consistency. And that's what I've tried to do. And I've been in situations of crisis, and I'm trying to do now in the leadership roles that I have. Never lie. Always be transparent, as transparent as you can be. Share the bad news if that's required, and there's a lot of bad news to go around at the moment. But I think you can do that in a way that is true to your core good values. Not hiding away bad news and spinning it is not a very good thing to do, and that's not good leadership behavior. But being honest, being transparent, and trying to do everything in alignment with the agreed values of the company, I think that's our role at the moment.
And so communication is going to be absolutely critical here, and you've touched on some of those areas there, particularly where you've sort of got to give tough messages. Have you any sort of examples of good, successful communication from within organizations or leaders that you've worked with? You've mentioned about James Timpson.
Yeah, I think that ironically, the current situation, we can be even better communicators, aren't we? So as the chair of the Big White Wall, I sit in on every week we have a whole company huddle where everyone zooms in, and we're all up on the screen, and we give information about the state of the business, what's going on, the kind of headlines of the performance of the company, and so on. And actually, it's the first time I've seen everyone in the same place at the same time online. And so I think, ironically, that we're finding, and I think other organizations that I've been in touch with are finding, that actually, even though we're isolated physically, the technology gives us the opportunity to be, in some ways, even better connected, and the flow of information even better, because everyone can hear the same thing at the same time by tuning in. So I think that regularly checking in with people is important. And I think I know that the staff of the Wall and other business I'm that I'm involved in as an investor or sit on the board of, having a regular check-in right now, I think, is really, really important. So if you're not doing that as a leader and you're waiting for special times to communicate or whatever it might be, I think you're missing a trick. And when we have our huddles, it's not just sharing business performance, but Yuval, who's our chief revenue officer, who hosts and runs the sort of online get-togethers, he asks us all a few days in advance to send in 3 photographs, jokes, pictures of our dog, stuff that and then the first probably about a third of the meeting is spent up with people saying, "So, Ian, you sent in a picture of Jockey Wilson behind you. What's all that about?" So it's a way of humanizing the situation, being connected. Very, very straightforward, very simple, but I think people really, really like that. And also being honest about numbers, sales, pipeline, letting people really know what the situation that the businesses are in, and what people can expect. I think that the worst thing that a leader can do is sow confusion or uncertainty, and the way through that, particularly at a time now, is being as transparent as you can be and communicating regularly and honestly. I think that really is number one. Allowing people to either in the group or directly to you express their anxieties, I think is really important. We'd be talking about well-being. What's really bad for well-being is not feeling that you're able to be honest, and not feeling that you're able to ask the CEO or the chair or whoever it is any questions that you want to. Doesn't mean you have to. There are some things that are commercially confidential or people confidential, but trying to be as open and honest and available as possible, I think, is important. At the same time as looking after yourself, not being available 24/7, I think that's a mistake. But looking after yourself so that when you are available to people, you are at your best. And you're not too stressed, and you're not too anxious, and you're not worrying about getting on to the next thing, that you are completely present for people. I think one of the mistakes I made was, I'm so busy. I'm the CEO. I'm so busy. I have another meeting to go to, and I can't really stop and chat. But I think that in these kind of circumstances, the sort of stopping and chatting with people is really, really important, because people are scared and people are anxious about the future, and the people that we employ are very anxious about money and salaries and mortgages and rent and all of that. So I think you can't communicate enough, you can't communicate often enough, and you can't do enough work on yourself so that when you show up, the best version of yourself shows up.
And I know from from experience, you personally have had some challenges in terms of your own trials of leading and running high pressure organizations and things.
Oh God,
like
yes.
That. So could you share with us, how you managed to get through some of those tough times, and what were the techniques or what were the sort of the tools that you now deploy to make sure you don't find yourself back in that situation?
Yeah. I remember at the start of when I started Wavelength, which is the company that I ran for 10 years with 2 business partners, and it was the first time that I had run my own company. All the companies I'd run before then were either non-profits or owned by somebody else. So this was the first time that I was involved in a business that I owned. And as you know, Ian, and anyone listening to this will know, there is a particular pressure when it's your own business. When it's your own money and your own house on the line, and you will only get paid, if you work really hard and are very smart. So the pressure is high, and I forgot at that time to look after myself. And I had a business partner who had a very different style to I had in terms of how he worked, and he would get very annoyed with me if I would decide to go for a walk during work time. And I felt a bit guilty about that. But then I came to see, actually, if I am one of the best assets of the company. That's how bad the company was, Ian. I was one of the better assets. But I need to look after myself. And it is as much work, it is as much a contribution to the company for me to go for an hour's walk with the dog or go for a run or something to get myself straight in my head so that I can be a really good business partner, salesperson, and so on. So don't forget to look after yourself. I think it's something that I did forget. Having a mentor, having someone outside of the turmoil of the everyday who doesn't have an emotional or financial stake in you, I think is really, really important. As I mentioned at the top here, I mentor quite a few people. And I think the value they get from me is the value that I have got from mentors in the past, which is having someone who's outside the everyday, doesn't know isn't caught up in all the politics and all the bullshit of the organization, and is able to help people sometimes just vent, just get it out about how anxious I am, or how I fucked something up, or how I'm really worried about how I'm going to deal with the next board meeting, or I'm going to deal with a business partner. Another technique that I've actually used since I was 21 and have used a lot in the last few months is journaling, writing stuff down. I find that opening up my journal, which is, there it is. I was doing it this morning. I find that process of having it go from here into words, into a pen, onto the page really helps. And at times when I've been really stressed, when the business that we started wasn't going very well, or when I was with Jamie, which was a bit of a nightmare in many respects, just being able to write that down and to be honest, just to getting it out really, really helped me. And also in retrospect, I found rereading my journals is really good for my mental health, because I realized a couple of things. One, what a bit of a wanker I was when I was younger, and I think I'm less like that now, I hope. But also what seems at the time, the worst thing in the world, actually isn't. And I think I've learned a lot from looking back at, the things that I've written in my journal. So I think physically looking after yourself, having someone to speak to who's outside of the everyday and the turmoil, really, really important. And using a journal, I have found to be really helpful.
The point about sort of the big white wall. I mean, from my perspective, I set up the Disruptive Innovators Network to look at how organizations can do things differently, whether it's through technology or the processes or the systems or just the way that their view of the world. And I'm fascinated about the online anonymous self-supporting way that the big white wall works. But could you just tell us a bit about why you decided that actually this was an organization you wanted to chair, and just tell us a bit more about how it goes about supporting organizations and people to with their personal well-being?
Yeah, sure. So the Big White Wall was founded 12 years ago, actually, by a woman called Jen Hyatt in the aftermath of one of her friends killing herself. And Jen's insight was that wouldn't it be good if there was a digital place where you could go to speak honestly and anonymously and get support about your mental health. I really like the idea of the population healthcare model. I like the idea of technology enabling it to be at massive scale. And I love the idea that in utter contradiction to the likes of Facebook and Instagram and all of those places, when you come onto the wall, you are anonymous. We don't know who you are. We'll never use your data for anything, and you can be as honest as you like about how you're feeling. And then we have a squad of what we call wall guides, who are professional accredited mental health professionals all around the world, who are available at literally the push of a button to the people on the platform. And I really like that. So I like the fact that it's about technology that keeps me learning. I like the fact that it's about mental health, which is, we're becoming more and more honest with ourselves as a society about how prevalent that is. And I like the fact it's peer-to-peer. I like the fact that it is people helping other people. And our proposition is, in the early stages of anxiety and depression, that kind of peer-to-peer can be very powerful and can stop people, their mental health issues deteriorating and having to take drugs and get involved in very expensive, face-to-face therapy. It runs on a B2B2C model. So the people who pay us are NHS, the British Army, UK Sport, the Government of Ontario, the Royal College of Nurses, who pay us, and then that gives access to their constituency to come onto the platform for them, free of charge, 24/7 on any device. So I think you can probably pick up, as I described the company, why I find it sort of emotionally the right place to be, intellectually the right place to be, and also it's a brilliant business model. Okay. I think it's got the potential to really scale and help a lot of people.
Okay, well, we'll share the contact details at the end of the this episode, Liam. But can I just sort of finish with a couple of final questions as well? And again, this is something which probably nobody has the answers to, but I'll be interested in your views. We're hearing a lot at the moment about things will never be the same again, that we're not going to be able to go back to how things were, and the whole future of work is going to massively change. What's your views about where organizations and leaders will end up once the whole crisis with the virus has passed?
Well, we're in week 3, aren't we, of the lockdown? So I guess the answer to that question will be very different from month 6 of a lockdown. Some of the things that I think I know are that it won't be the same, and it shouldn't be the same. I think that if I take the big white wall, we have proven that we are able to be a completely distributed company, where we don't need to come into an office in London. Now, so in one future world, we remain a distributed company, and we don't have the overhead of offices and so on. Now, I think there's always a need for people physically to get together. But I think one of the things I'm thinking, one of the things I'm trying not to think is, how can we hang on to what we've got? And how can we make sure that we've got as much of that when we return to normal? But rather think, okay, what can we learn now about how we can be better, more efficient when it comes back? I have a hope, I think it is a hope, that purpose-driven business and businesses that have an authentic, genuine connection with society and aren't just about profit margin and shareholder value, that those businesses will be more valued in society. I think that as well as developing the resilience of our companies, I think we need to think about, companies that seem to be relevant to the new situation. I think will be, I hope will be seen by by consumers and by investors as the right sort of businesses to be involved with. And I hope that we won't forget the good things that have come out of this, the sense of solidarity. I think people who are genuine about purpose and seeing business as a force for good in the world, that we won't forget the warmth, the new levels of connectivity that there have been between us. And I think one thing that I'm trying to do, and again, I would recommend this to your audience, Ian, is to make sure that you are continuing to put currency through your ecosystem now. And I think there's 2 reasons to do that. One, from a personal point of view. I don't know about you, but just being involved in this with you gives me strength. I think we gain strength by sharing whatever wisdom and insight and strength that we've got. It's a very 2-way street. But I think also those businesses or those leaders that continue to show concern for the whole ecosystem in which their business is operating, their staff, their supply chains, their investors, I think, again, those are the companies that are going to come out of this better. Those that shut up shop, and try and outsource as much of the pressure as possible onto their supply chain and their value chain. I don't think people are going to forget that when people have money to spend again and start to buy products and services. At a bigger, more macro level, one would hope that we as a society will, take this as a wake-up call, and we'll start taking climate change seriously in a way that we pretty much haven't been so far, outside of a sort of group of elite. Definitely there'll be less travel, won't there? I think the days of, I'm going to jump on a plane and fly off to Rome for the weekend, or, let's have a business meeting in New York. I think those days are behind us, and there are going to be much more restrictions on travel and who can travel and when you can travel. And again, there'll be opportunities in that for business and for us as well as for the environment. So I think we're in a situation, aren't we, where we kind of know things are going to change drastically. We're not quite sure what that looks like, but I think that we can ready ourselves by looking after our ecosystem and thinking about how we can make sure that we are not only resilient but relevant when this new normal comes about.
And final question then, in terms of, one sentence, what, drawn on your many years of experience as a leader, what one bit of advice would you give to leaders in the current situation that they're dealing with now?
Look after yourself and communicate.
And don't be a dick.
And don't be a dick. Yeah, I've got a list of instructions that I gave out last week, and don't be a dick is one of them. And I think it's so easy, isn't it, when the pressure's on to be a dick and not realise you are being. But I think now is the opportunity, particularly for people who think they're involved in purpose-driven businesses. Now is the opportunity for us to demonstrate that really means something, and people won't forget those who get it right, and people won't forget those who get it wrong.
And on that note, Liam, thank you so much for your time and your very valuable insights there. I hope people will get an awful lot out of this session about well-being. Thank you very much.
It's a real pleasure, and best wishes to everyone. Stay well.